Is the U.S. Constitution neutral on abortion, or does it prescribe equal protection for the preborn? And what about criminalizing women for committing abortions? We'll tackle these issues today on The Mark Harrington Show. Activist Radio, The Mark Harrington Show, is brought to you by Created Equal, and you can donate to our work by going to createdequal.org. Just, click on the donate link there on the right side on the homepage and send us a gift for the ministry. We are an organization that stands for taking young people out to college and high school campuses. We use abortion victim photography to kind of set the foundations for the debate, and we can use your support. Also, if you want to support the program, you can leave a 5-star review, and the program is available on all the popular podcasting platforms. Well, today we're going to be talking about the Dobbs v. Jackson case. You might be saying, well, Mark, that happened a couple of months ago. That's old news. We need to move on. Well, what's important about Dobbs is that I think a lot of people are missing that Dobbs didn't go far enough, and we're going to talk about that today. We're all happy that Roe v. Wade is overturned. In fact, I'm joyful. I'm still celebrating a little bit here and there, because it was a big deal, obviously. We've been working for this day for many, many years, and some of us for decades. But if you look at Dobbs, it doesn't go far enough, and a lot of pro-lifers don't know that. So we want to talk about that today. In order to do that, I have as my guest Alex Snyder, and she is the CEO for Life Legal Defense Foundation, the people who keep me out of trouble, and we appreciate her being on the program. Thanks for being on the show, Alex.
Sure, Mark. Thanks for having me.
So let's plunge right in here. As is normally my case, the case I read your periodical here, your publication of Life Legal Defense Foundation that you send out in the mail. And on the front page here, you had a post, an article entitled, "What's Next? The U.S. Constitution Protects the Unborn, the 14th Amendment, and Abortion." And, as we were all processing the Dobbs v. Jackson case, we understand that when Justice Alito wrote the opinion for the majority, he basically said that abortion, that the Constitution is neutral on abortion. It doesn't mention it per se, and the other justices concurred with that. Justice Kavanaugh went as far to say that the Constitution is neither pro-life or pro-choice. And by doing that, they said, okay, well, the U.S. Supreme Court has no say on abortion. We're going to send it back to the states. And we're all happy about that, of course, because we got it out of the hands of the U.S. Supreme Court, which is a good thing. But the truth being known is the Constitution is not silent on abortion, is it?
No, not really. I mean, we have an inherent right to life. I mean, outside the Constitution, we have an inherent right to life. That is recognized throughout our Constitution. It's recognized in the preamble of the Constitution, which actually refers to the blessings of liberty to our posterity. So it does contemplate already people who are not yet born. And again, I mean, there's an explicit right to life in the 5th and 14th Amendments.
Right. And you go on to say in this piece, you talk about the history regarding abortion in America and how when the 14th Amendment was drafted and ratified, that it was understood that abortion, or that the preborn were citizens or persons as we understand it. So can you talk about that? Because I think a lot of people miss that part. They say, well, the Constitution doesn't mention it, doesn't mention abortion, doesn't mention the preborn. So how can the U.S. Constitution protect the preborn?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of types of killing that the Constitution doesn't explicitly address, but again,
right,
it does say that we have a right to life. So we'll say, okay, well, you have a right to life, except for in vehicular manslaughter cases. You don't have a right to life then because the Constitution is silent on vehicular manslaughter. That would be ridiculous. And it's just as ridiculous to say that the Constitution does not now or has never protected the right to life for unborn children. That is categorically untrue. every state had laws prior to Roe v. Wade and going back to a couple centuries prohibiting abortion, and in some cases granting an explicit right to life, but a personhood right to the unborn.
Alex Snyder is my guest from Life Legal Defense, and we're talking about whether Dobbs v. Jackson went far enough. We understand that it sent it back to the state legislatures, and now we're battling state by state to enact prohibitions against abortion and restrict it severely, which is a good thing. I'm happy for that. But the truth of the matter is the U.S. Constitution does protect the unborn in the 14th and 5th Amendments, and I think that's lost on a lot of pro-lifers. So when Dobbs was handed down, I mean, I'm sure you're like me. We were pleased that happened, but we know the court didn't go far enough. So what do we want to happen now? Because you're saying that the U.S. Constitution does protect the preborn, so the states shouldn't have the right to make laws on abortion. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. So if you take the analogy of slavery, we would not say that we should return slavery to the states. I mean, we've been there already. We fought a civil war over that. We've had 2 constitutional amendments dealing specifically with that issue. So we don't say, okay, let's see, the right result would be to go back and let states decide who is a human person that's protected under the law and who is not. And yet that is exactly what happened with this decision. And I want to be careful in critiquing the decision because, of course, as you said, we're elated that the Supreme Court has even gotten this far. But I think it's very telling that Justice Alito, and I know why he had to do it. I mean, he was threading the needle here. So, I'm not faulting him really in any way. But what he did was say that there is no right to abortion that can be found under the 14th Amendment. But he didn't go so far as to say there's an actual right to life for unborn children or preborn children under the same amendment. And that's what I would like to see happen.
Right. Did Clarence Thomas make that case?
Not exactly. I mean, he has in the past, but not exactly in this decision. I mean, his whole thing was, look, we shouldn't even have these what are called substantive due process rights at all. And he's been soundly criticized for that because he said, in other cases involving gay marriage and contraception and things like that, those are all rights that were created that were not actually in the Constitution. And he thinks the Supreme Court should focus on those rights that are explicitly in the Constitution, and everything else should be off limits.
The 14th Amendment says this, that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So we understand Harry Blackmun, when he wrote that the majority opinion in Roe, redefined person in that 5th and 14th Amendment to exclude the unborn. What we're saying is that the U.S. Supreme Court should rule that there is an inherent right to life for the preborn in that amendment. Is that what you're saying?
That's certainly what I would like to see happen. Do I think that's possible right now? No, because Justice Kavanaugh has made it clear that he would not support such a thing, that he believes that this should be up to people's elected representatives, which, I mean, if his concurring opinion had been the majority opinion, this would be devastating because it means that Congress could just pass a law saying abortion is legal at any stage of pregnancy or beyond pregnancy, and that would be that. And that hopefully is not the outcome that he intended.
Yeah, and that's what the U.S. Congress, or at least the Democrats, want to do.
Yeah, and they've done it. I mean, thank God for Joe Manchin, who's been able to stop that. But they've passed the Women's Health the Women's Health Reproduction Act, or whatever it is that would codify abortion.
Women's Health Protection Act.
Yeah.
Well, I've told my friends we should be careful what we ask for. We wanted Roe overturned. It was overturned. We're happy about that. But now we've got this battle state by state, which is going to, in my opinion, be almost more difficult than possibly what we had in the Roe regime. I'm not saying I'm glad we should have stayed in that situation, but we have this patchwork now across the country, and it's going to be difficult in states like California, for example. And we're fighting an amendment possibly in Michigan. And we're going to see this happening all across the country. and I'm concerned about our ability to defeat these things. One of the quotes from your article here in your periodical that you send out, which I thought was very profound, is this: "It's incoherent that a living human being would be worthy of protection in one state and treated as nothing more than medical waste in another." I think that is so right. In one state, you're going to say, the unborn are protected. In the next state, they cross over the border and they're not. Either they're persons or they're not, right? And they're protected by the Constitution. That's your point.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's not like we've not been here before. We have, as a nation, we have dealt with this issue with slavery. And I know there are people who, it's not a one-on-one, the analogy isn't perfect, but it is close enough because you're talking about excluding people from basic human rights protections, civil rights protections, because of their arbitrary characteristics. You know what I mean? Obviously, with slavery, it had to do with skin color. With abortion, it has to do with size, age of development. I mean, even the fact that in some states, a 13 or 14, let's say a 14-week-old baby would not be protected, yet a 15-week-old baby would be protected. Those are so arbitrary, and the law cannot be arbitrary. I mean, this is a fundamental concept of the rule of law, that it must apply evenly across the board. It's why we have a 14th Amendment. So we don't have these inequalities in the law. And that's exactly what has happened with abortion since 1973 and is continuing now. And the distinctions are just becoming more obvious now.
So the way forward, there's a couple options here. As you say, the U.S. Supreme Court isn't going to soon rule that the unborn are persons as we understand it in the Fifth and 14th Amendment. We understand that's not going to happen. Would you prefer that to happen, or would you prefer there be a constitutional amendment that establishes personhood at conception? Which is the better route to take strategically and legally?
I mean, I think an amendment is, if you could get an amendment, I think an amendment is more secure. Certainly,
aren't you
and then
tacitly admitting that the Constitution is deficient on that subject by doing that?
That's a good point. That is a good point. But I think, I mean, just like with the 14th Amendment, I don't think we admitted that the Constitution was deficient. We just clarified that this is, in fact, what the Constitution says. I mean, that's what every amendment has done, is clarified what the Constitution has said. Now, Supreme Court cases do that too, but they can be overturned, as we know. So I think, again, an amendment is a more secure way to go.
My guest is Alex Snyder, and you can go to lifelegaldefensefoundation.org, where you can read her recent article on the Dobbs v. Jackson case and how it doesn't go far enough. I think that we all need to understand what the Constitution says about or what it says about the unborn, in that it speaks to protecting the unborn and not just returning this issue back to the state legislatures. And it calls for equal protection of the laws, which is a good transition to the next subject I want to bring up, which is kind of this untouchable subject within the pro-life movement. We don't want to talk about this, which I'm saying to people, yes, we do. We can't avoid it. The pro-abortion forces are going to make us debate and discuss this, whether we like it or not. We better get our ducks in a row on this and be able to present a logical case as to why we believe in equal protection. And when I say that, what I mean is the unborn need equal protection. That means if someone takes their life, whether they're an abortionist or anyone else, the laws have to be applied equally. Yeah. And unfortunately, what we've seen is lots of pro-life laws, in fact, probably all of them, if they ban abortion, they carve out a exception, if you will, for women who might be procuring an abortion. And recently, National Right to Life published an open letter basically saying that we, quote unquote, we as the pro-life movement, speaking for everyone, of course, they weren't speaking for me, but we believe that women should never be prosecuted for an abortion. And I, for one, didn't sign that letter. In fact, nobody came to me and asked me to, because they know where I stand on this. They knew I wouldn't sign it. The letter was very problematic to start with. And I kind of want to get into the subject with you because this is something that I feel like we have to address. It seems like
Yeah.
we're afraid to. We're concerned that this is going to slow down the ability to make progress in state legislatures. I don't believe that myself. So I guess the question I want to pose to you: should women be punished for abortion? I'll just straight out say it. Do you agree with national right to life that women should never be prosecuted for abortions?
I do not agree that women should never be prosecuted. I mean, I think we can talk about what that looks like, what kind of penalties, civil penalties, criminal penalties, and a lot of that will depend on what the law is concerning killing of unborn children in other contexts. So if if a law considers that a feticide and has and that's what a lot of laws have done historically, is considered that a feticide and had lesser punishments than, let's say, for killing a child after birth, for example. So, but I do not believe that women should categorically be exempt, or as that letter that you mentioned stated, that it is not pro-life to say that women should in some cases be in some way penalized for. It's not penalized for abortion. We have to remember there are laws that prohibit abortion. So what we're saying is that women should not be penalized for violating the laws already in place against abortion. So, and again, going back to the rule of law, it's a basic principle of the rule of law that laws be applied evenly to everyone. And
Right.
in this case, you are excluding, in some cases, the only perpetrator of that crime, and you're excluding that individual from penalties under the law.
Yeah, and going back to this open letter by National Right to Life, and the thing that many things I disagreed with, but first of all, it was overly broad. It kind of had this absolutist position that the entire pro-life movement, everybody within it, agrees with them that there should never be a prosecution for abortion for women that commit them. It didn't take into effect that reasonable people can disagree. I think I'm a reasonable person. I can disagree and do it without being disagreeable. It was like, this is the end of the story. No more comment. Goodbye. And I didn't like that. And it also relied on decades old data. This is a position the pro-life movement has taken historically throughout the decades. I get it. I understand it. In order to try to get this legislation passed in state legislatures, I get it pragmatically. But now it's post-Roe. Now things have changed. Isn't it time we go back and review some of this data? Because I think a lot of we're relying on a lot of old information. I think it's time to take a second look at this.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing too is, okay, so just even in terms of how people look at their own abortions, and I will admit I am post-abortive, I'm not saying, so I don't want to exclude myself and say I've never had an abortion, and so I don't know what it would be like, or I do know what it would be like. I wish it had been illegal, and I wish those laws had applied to me at that time, because I would not have had an abortion, or it would have been much more difficult for me to do so. So, but the letter does not address a couple of things. One is that it refers to women who have had abortions or who are seeking abortions as victims of the pro-life or the pro-abortion movement, or victims of Roe. I find that, frankly, really patronizing, like shockingly patronizing and offensive, because I even when I was choosing my abortion, I did not consider myself a victim of anything. It was a choice that I had made. I was very young. Even at that age, I knew what I was doing. I regretted it very soon afterwards, and still to this day, profoundly regret my decision. So I want to make that clear. But I was not a victim. And I think to to refer to women in that language, I think is taking us back. I mean, way back.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
it's
could
so
tell you this,
problematic.
feminists on college campuses, you bring that up and you say that they're victims if they had an abortion, believe me, you're gonna get hammered for that.
Yeah. I mean,
They
yeah.
don't view themselves that way, most of them, 99% of them view themselves that way. As you say, it's patronizing. It puts women as kind of these, feeble, unable to make rational decisions regarding pregnancy and so forth. It casts them in a negative light. Everything the feminist movement doesn't want, right? That
Yeah.
they are capable of making decisions. And now we have people shouting their abortions who are happy about it, think it's the best thing that ever happened to them. Things have changed. They're not what they
Yeah.
used to be. And
Yeah.
so I think it's the wrong messaging. And believe me, you will get shouted down at a college campus if you say women are victims. I know it
Yeah. I mean, it
because I have
implies
been.
we have no, yeah. Well, it implies we have no moral agency. I mean, and that's just, I think that's just absurd. I mean, the other thing, even from a spiritual perspective, if you call somebody a
Mhm.
victim, you are
Right.
saying that they don't need forgiveness, they don't need I mean, well, you could say they need healing, but it's a different kind of healing than the healing that
Mhm.
people need from abortion. And again, I speak from my own experience, and the experience of, you know, many, many women. I used to do post-abortion ministry. I used to be the director of a pregnancy center. I did post-abortion ministry, led post-abortion ministry there. And if you tell women they're victims, they're not going to know that they need forgiveness. They're not going to be able to move on from that decision. And I think that's really damaging.
I agree. And the law is a teacher, as we know.
Yes.
When the law
Yeah.
says abortion is illegal, if the law says it's homicide, women, some, will see that and say, well, I shouldn't get an abortion now because I believe the law is reflecting morality in some way, right?
Yeah.
And if we say the law is a teacher and we say it's murder, and then we're not going to prosecute people who perpetrate it, it's kind of like our messaging is way off here. How do you respond to people who say, and this is the main argument. It's a pragmatic argument. They say, first of all, Americans aren't ready for this. The pro-abortion side will use this as a club to beat us over the head. They'll say, you want to throw women in jail, and so forth. And we're going to lose the argument, and therefore we're not going to get these pieces of legislation passed that have equal protection in them. And I think 20 years ago, we could say, well, we want to prosecute the abortionists because 90% of all abortions were performed surgically,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now, and even I think it was in 2003, only 5% of all abortions were chemical abortions. Things have changed a whole lot now. I mean, over 50%
Yeah.
of abortions are done by pill, right? And a lot of times the women will order these online. They might get them mailed to them, or they have to go to a pharmacy to pick them up. They'd never meet the abortionist in person. In fact, they might do it over a Zoom call. Might not even be a doctor. Might not be a medical person with the doctors with a degree. And so now the abortionist is even cut out of the equation almost entirely.
Yeah.
Let me read this quote. This is from Clark Forsyth. I respect Clark a whole lot. He's a brilliant mind when
Yeah.
it comes to a lot of this stuff. He says this: prosecuting women is counterproductive, and this gets to the pragmatism of the thing, to the goal of effective enforcement of the law against abortionists. That may have been the case 20 years ago, but I don't think that's the case today. I appreciate you being on the program, friends. I want you to go to Alex's website there at Life Legal Defense. And the website is lifelegaldefensefoundation.org, lifelegaldefensefoundation.org. And I really encourage you to read the article that she wrote here on Dobbs and how it doesn't go far enough. And there's also a discussion about equal protection in here as well. And if possible, fund them, send them a check. They deserve it. They keep us out of trouble and help us with some of the legal issues that we often encounter as we go out onto the public streets and the sidewalks and the college campuses across America. So thank you, Alex, for being on the program.
Thanks so much, Mark, and just thank you for just being just a stalwart against the culture of death. Thank you.
We appreciate it. We'll see you next time. God bless you. God bless America. And remember, America, to bless God.
You've been listening to Mark Harrington, your radio activist. For more information on how to make a difference for the cause of life, liberty, and justice, go to createdequal.org. To follow Mark, go to markharringtonshow.com. Be sure to tune in next time for your marching orders in the culture war.